Welcome to the Global Leaders Roundtable Fireside Chat Series. Listen, we are doing a particular series that is a part of this entire podcast and movement with leaders that are coming to talk to me just in an intimate moment about their life and what God is doing with them. And so I'm super excited to have our guest today that's going to be talking about something that I think is not talked about enough. And honestly, I think that it's one of those secret, subtle struggles that people in the kingdom of God, especially leaders, are dealing with today. It's a silent killer. And not only a silent killer physically, but a silent killer in the emotions, in the mental state, and in your spirit. And some of you may not know what I'm talking about right now, but when we get into this conversation, you're going to realize that it's something that maybe you've been struggling with, or it's something that you are so familiar with because other people in your life are secretly or publicly struggling with it too. For those of you who do not know me, I am your host, Kenyon R. Dudley, and I am the founder of this entire incredible movement called the Global Leaders Roundtable. You can catch our show premiering on our channel, our YouTube channel over there at TGLR Network. And we've got so much content that's already there with leaders from around the world, discussions we're having about the things that really matter most. And I tell you, these conversations have been revolutionizing me, transforming me. And I know that if you have been binge watching or following, that it's been transforming you. There's so many people that's been reaching out to us, my team and I, and just letting us know how imperative these discussions are. And you've been encouraging us to keep moving along, keep dropping these pertinent discussions because they're helping. And that is what it's meant to do. I'm super excited to invite Deneen Smith. She's getting ready to come to the virtual roundtable to have this discussion really about healed and whole, right? A woman's journey to self-worth, embodiment, and spiritual wellness. And she's really wrapped this discussion up in how it looks to overcome body shaming and to overcome this epidemic that I say that's happening in the church, happening at the leadership levels, all the way down to the pews. We're talking about how to love you and to love yourself in the skin and the body that you are in. I'm so excited. Y'all help me welcome author, speaker. She is a teacher, and she's about to teach us something today. Deneen Smith. How are you?
I am great, Kenyon. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you. As I was saying before we went live with this discussion, this is something that I think is imperative that we talk about. So it's a special conversation because so many people are struggling with some of the things that you've shared with us and our team, and that you're going to share today with those viewers and listeners. Why don't we jump right in, because we were already in conversation before we went live. So I want
Yes,
to
we
keep the
were.
momentum, but let's just jump in. Let's backtrack just for a moment. Introduce yourself to our viewing audience. Let them know who you are, what part of the world you're in, and what has God actually placed on your heart to do right now.
Okay, well, thank you for that. My name is Mia Deneen. I am a singer and songwriter, originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I
Yeah.
currently reside in the Atlanta metro area
My
with my
hometown.
husband and three children.
Yeah.
Actually, four. My daughter just got married, so we have a new addition to our family. I am a homeschool mother. I'm an educator by trade. I do have a degree in education, and I have had a 20-year degree as an educator.
Wow.
But recently, in the past, I would say since 2020, I have been speaking and writing on the issue of body image healing because God brought me on a journey. I have always had a love hate, mostly hate relationship with my body and my body image. I have tried every diet probably twice
Mm,
in this quest to be thin
right.
because deep down, I said I wanted to be thin. I just wanted to lose weight. But deep down, it was because I thought that being thin was my way of achieving the life and the love that I wanted.
Mm,
I had I had this sentiment from a young person of not enoughness.
yeah.
And that not enoughness was so strong in my heart that it became my truth. And it followed me around throughout, even when I was in school and I was getting degrees and I was doing well and I was singing and I was overseas on opera stages, and I still was
Wow.
plagued with this not enoughness because I could not fit my body into a size 6 dress.
Right.
And so, I always felt that I was living my life at a deficit. And it was kind of like a rotten seed that began to bear rotten fruit in my
Mm,
life. It affected my relationships. It affected my job choices. It affected how I would play small in
yeah.
my career choices. It affected my romantic relationships, and
Right.
it affected my relationship with God because you know what? Deep down, I knew God loved me, but I wasn't sure He liked me.
Wow. Ooh, that's good. Yeah. How many people, right, are right there where you were, um, where maybe they know God loves them, right? That's what the lullaby or the song says when you're a kid. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And so it's one of those things that I know he loves me, right? That's what they said, but I don't know if he likes me. I don't know if I'm likable. I don't know if anyone around me even likes me. I don't know if I like myself. You
That's
know
so.
what I'm saying? And I heard you say this in the virtual green room before we came live, and I want to dig deeper into this because you just brought it up. Again, you talk about how this not enoughness started when you were a young girl. Um, that toxic perspective or seed was planted and entered into your life when you were young, and that happens to the most of us, right?
Yes.
Where all of those toxic things that show up in our life as an adult, we can always trace it back to an open door in our soul or our heart or our mind as a child. Walk us through that. What was the culture like? What was the atmosphere like? What was it like for young Mia? Um, and what were some of those doors, if you could identify them, that served as an open door for all of the shame and the hurt and things that played a part in this?
Sure. There were, as I look back, there were so many things. But there were a few things that I can pinpoint.
Yeah,
I can pinpoint the pain points when I look back.
right.
One was that when I was young, I spent the majority of my time um, living with my grandmother,
Okay.
and I was living in predominantly Black community.
Hmm.
And I was. when I was born, I was 10 pounds at birth. So I've
Okay.
always been on the larger side. I've always
Sure.
been a thick person, even as a child.
Okay.
Okay. And in our communities, that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, when it was, my grandmother, was a kindergarten teacher, and
Okay.
so I went to kindergarten. I was with her probably up until I was 5 or 6 years old, up until kindergarten, first grade age.
Okay.
Um, but when it was time for first grade, I moved with my parents into the suburbs. And when I moved with my parents into the suburbs, I was the only Black girl in the class. And I remember being going into school, and I was the only Black girl in the class. And I
Mm,
remembered that my skin was different. I
yeah.
remember my nose was different. I remember my hair was different. But one thing in particular, I remember that I was thicker than even the boys. Even the
Wow.
boys.
Wow.
And I remember, that all of those isms, that racism, the colorism, the texturism, the featureism,
Yep.
all of those things. And I remember, in school, just those things being, a source of shame,
Mm,
and bullying, and being left out of groups and being ostracized for who I was. And then on top of that, on top of all of those things, I was the fat girl. And
wow.
so, those things, kind of put seeds into my young heart
Yeah.
that, kind of over time were watered and began to produce fruit.
I'm sitting here listening to you, and I think about how many people can agree and attest to what you're saying. That a lot of the shame that they've dealt with concerning their body, their image, their looks, entered in grade school. You know, um, I know for me, and because I know you talk a lot about women being healed in this area, but it's also men, as well. We just don't talk about it as much,
Okay.
because it's society doesn't even allow that. Like, what is that, right? What is
Mhm.
a man talking about, how they feel in their body and in their skin,
Right.
especially
Right.
black
Who
men,
gives men permission to feel, especially Black men?
especially black men. So I was the anomaly because I was the kid from Atlanta that I felt everything and I told you about it.
Mhm.
But I got in trouble a lot for that because of my
Mm.
culture and upbringing. That's just not what you do. um and so I think about even me, though, being able to attest to what you're talking about, and how school, the structure and the culture of school, through kids and through even teachers, and how they foster this atmosphere of, if you don't fit a specific mold, then you are not acceptable to society.
Mhm.
And so you do get those little microaggressions and things like that, where you're not
Absolutely.
invited into the group. You're on the playground, and the all of these people are here having fun, and they don't call your name.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And so we don't think in the moment how big those microaggressions, those subtleties are, until you get older and you're like, oh my God, it's showing up in the way of my eating habit.
Mhm.
It's showing up in the way of the way that I, romantically relate. It shows up in the way of how I even step on the stage, or in front of the
Absolutely.
class that I'm teaching. Like, I can see it.
Mhm.
And so, how imperative has it been for the work that you're doing to start with people going back to their youth and really identifying those areas that shame entered? How imperative has that been for you?
Um, I think, it's not always necessary to go back and, and pinpoint
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
But I think that it is important to understand that our thoughts came from somewhere. You know,
Mm,
I think, some the work that I do is not so much, I'm not a doctor, so I'm more of a body image coach and advocate and an instructor. So
mhm.
I more am saying to women, these thoughts that you have, these are not necessarily facts.
Okay.
These are truths that these are not necessarily truths. These are thoughts. And
Yeah.
these thoughts came from somewhere. And so instead of saying, let's dig back in your past and let's go back to these places of shame. A lot of women do know, if they're really thinking about it, they know,
Yeah.
they know those places, those pain points, they know where they are. But, it's just for me to say, I want you to know that these things that were said to you were not truths. They were
Yeah.
not facts. They were thoughts. And even the people that said them to you may have said them as though they were facts, but they were not facts.
Mm,
Bodies are not better or worse because they're small or because they're large.
yeah.
Body diversity was created by God.
Yeah. I love that.
Hmm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
And
Body
so just
diversity
to
was
try to
created by God.
untangle those lies, no matter who said it, and no
Yeah.
matter whether they said it meaning well, because sometimes people say it in different spirits. Some people say it and they want to be mean. Some people say it and they mean well.
Hmm.
Some people say it and they're just regurgitating what they've heard.
Hmm.
And so, but no matter what the spirit of what was said to you or what was imparted to you was, no matter what the spirit is, the important thing now is to say, it's not your fault what was told to you,
Yeah.
but it is your responsibility at this point to understand that those were not facts. And
Mm,
you don't have to believe them from this moment on.
yeah.
You can decide to reject that because it was not a fact, it was somebody's opinion. And you can choose to believe from this day on what God says about you, because that is the only thing that is true.
I love the fact that you said you get to choose from this point on. I remember just me personally um, finding out or discovering the moment that I had a choice to believe or to reject whatever it was, it was so liberating. It was like a weight had lifted off of me that was on me
Yes.
for 20 some odd years, 30 some odd
Isn't it
years.
beautiful?
I mean, Mia, I was able to breathe better, all of these things, because I realized, hey, I don't have to receive that.
You don't. Isn't that so beautiful?
It
It was the
is.
same way for me. It was like, what? I don't have to believe what the world says about me. I
Nope.
don't have to own that.
Nope.
I can choose to believe something different. And,
Mm,
and as believers, we are called to live counterculturally, right?
yes.
But the crossover when it comes to body image is hard. You know why? I'll tell you
Mhm.
why.
Okay.
Because even in the church, we live in two kingdoms, Kenyon.
Mm,
We live in two kingdoms, one for the body and one for the soul.
hmm.
We are still largely in the church co-opting the culture. We are still giving over all of our power to what the world says is a good body, is a healthy body. And we come to the kingdom for our soul freedom, but we're still doing everything as far as what the culture says, as far as our physical bodies, and as
Yeah.
far as appearances and all of that stuff. We are still very much wrapped up. And so, what I'm about is alignment.
Yeah.
Alignment, because I know for me that is the only thing that brought peace to my soul,
Mm,
is aligning that. I could no longer live in one place for my body and one place for my soul, because
hmm.
it was really such a place of anxiety for me,
Yeah.
where because I couldn't reconcile the two, because I've lived in such disconnection. But it was only when I had that alignment for where I knew for a fact that what God said about my body was what was true,
Yeah.
and that was the thing that brought me the peace that I needed. And I know that, like I said, I am nobody. So if God can do it for me and was willing to do that for me, then
Mhm.
he will do it for anyone.
That's so good. I'm thinking about, I call it this, wholly integrated, being
Absolutely.
wholly integrated, bringing everything about you into alignment. And I love that that is your work. And that is what God is calling you to do in this hour, to help people wholly integrate. Because people do live scattered lives, right?
Mhm.
Not just in their brain, but in their bodies. They are here, there, and everywhere. Like, I'm from Atlanta, so we can get a little country, and that's what we say sometimes. Like, you're here, there, and everywhere. You know, and the work of helping people come together in their perception and perspective of who God said that they are, is one of the ultimate gifts that people can receive. So let's dig a little bit deeper. How did you come to the turning point in your journey where things begin to integrate for you? What was those moments, or that moment in your life, that brought you to the awareness of what you were dealing with, and you opted into, let's turn this thing around?
Okay. So, to make a long story very condensed,
Hmm.
um, I was going through a process. What I was asking God for when I was fasting and praying was a physical healing.
Yeah.
There was a heart rate issue that I was going through. I had recently lost a loved one in a traumatic way.
Mm.
And I don't know exactly what set off the heart rate issue, but I think that was that was kind of what set it in motion,
Yeah.
was seeing this traumatic death of a loved one, actually
Mhm.
witnessing it.
Wow.
And after that, I couldn't get my heart to act right. My heart rate was just up, up, up. I couldn't sleep. I was having nightmares. I was
Yeah.
running back and forth to the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack. And so I was crying out to God for physical healing, physical healing. And what God decided to do while I was in the process of, getting my heart scanned and on all these medicines and, wearing a heart monitor, that was like a month-long process. While I was in that process, what God in his greatness, in his great mercy decided to do was to deal with all this other stuff,
Mm.
this internal turmoil that I was going through.
Yeah.
And I remember the very first step in the process was what I like to call illumination.
Yeah.
And it was basically when I began to just expose everything to the light, what I was doing, like I just kind of, I I want to say I picked up the phone and I called my sister,
Okay.
and I told my sister, I've I I'm eating cake mix in the middle of the night, like when my husband and my kids are in bed. I'm
Yeah.
going downstairs and I'm not baking no cake. I'm just eating the cake mix, because
Wow.
when I feel anxiety, that's what I do. I
Yeah.
said, and I'm going outside and I'm throwing it in the trash can so that nobody knows. And then I'm
Wow.
getting back in bed. That's the kind of stuff that I'm doing when I feel this anxiety.
Yeah.
And I said, sometimes I feel it so strongly that, I toss and turn and I can't sleep
Yeah.
until I go downstairs and I eat a lot.
Yeah.
And then that's the only thing that allows me to go to sleep.
Calm down. Yeah.
And I just exposed it to the light. I exposed everything that was going on to the
Wow.
light. And I cried out to God and I just told him everything. But it was actually, telling a person,
Yeah.
because, and what I realized was that I was stripping the power away from shame. I
Hmm.
was in so much shame because I was a leader in the church. I was
Yeah.
a choir director. I
Yeah.
was, all of this stuff that I was going through. I was doing it. It was completely under behind closed doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody knew what I was struggling with, and I was afraid for anybody to know what I was struggling with because I knew the word. I love God. I
Yeah.
love God for real. And so I was so ashamed to be going through these things
Yeah.
because I love God for real. And it didn't even make sense in my own heart that I would be going through these things when I
Mm,
love God for real.
mm,
But I realize now that it was so important that I stripped the enemy of his power by speaking it.
yeah.
And every time I go to speak, I make sure that I say something like that.
Mm,
I say something about those moments where I never would have told anybody, those moments where I went to the store and I bought boxes of cookies and I ate them all that same night. I
wow.
say something about that because I always get somebody to come to me and they say, I understand. I understand. I've been there.
Wow.
And every time I share those transparent moments, I feel like I'm taking kingdom domain. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm taking power away from the enemy
Hmm.
because though shame loves to be in the darkness, those types of things, they can only thrive in places where hope is low.
Hmm.
And so if I keep talking and if I keep telling my story and if I keep pulling the curtain back on shame, then I can let more light in. And
Yeah.
those are the spaces where healing can happen.
Mm. And I think so many people need to hear that today, right? Um, that it's okay to rip the band-aid off, the covers off, and to expose whatever it is to someone that may be trusted or in a trusted circle or what have you. But it's okay to get it out. The more that you keep something in and try to internalize it and deal with it alone, the more the enemy of your soul, of your psyche, can really wreak havoc. But, you know, a lot of people, read this scripture and they think about it from one perspective, where there are two or three in agreement, there he is, God in the midst. But the truth is, and they think it's just about prayer and agreement in that way. But the truth is, you just explained that and how you reached out to your sister and you confessed and you said, these are the things that I'm dealing with. And immediately agreement happened. Immediately you shared something where your sister could come into agreement with you on freedom, and God showed up and began to heal. How many of us have held on to things, it's specifically in this area? I remember there was a time I told my wife I was under so much pressure and stress. Um, I looked at her and I said, I'm full, but I keep going back to the refrigerator. Like I'm full, like we just had a meal, and I discerned it. I clocked it. One day we were sitting in the living room after we had had dinner. Kids were playing, and I legit had gotten back up off the couch with her. We were getting ready to watch a movie, and I went right back to the kitchen, and it was like my brain was on autopilot. You know what I'm saying? It
Hmm.
was like my brain was on autopilot. I went to the refrigerator and I just began to fix something else to eat. And my
Hmm.
wife was like, "We just left the dinner table." And in that moment, I stopped. I made a little joke about it, but it was serious. I said, "I think I'm emotionally eating."
Hmm. Hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And at that point, I had gained so much weight that even for my height, it wasn't healthy. My doctors
Hmm.
were telling me it's not, it wasn't healthy.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize in the moment, although I said that, jokingly, but it was like a catalyst for God to really come into my life and share with me why I was doing these things. And when I tell you, like you said, the anxiety, the pressures and things like that will cause you sometimes to do these things. And it's just a drug of choice. It's no different
That's it.
from anybody else's
No
issue.
different. No different. And
It's just
church,
one
we
drug
in
of choice.
church, we feel away, you know.
Yeah,
We might feel away about other, about other vices,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
it's no different.
It's no different. How have you, in this current moment, how have you been using this story, this testimony? Dig a little deeper for us in the work that you're doing now. Are you? I know you have a book. Um, are you, hosting anything? What can people do? Because there are probably women right now listening in and saying, "Wow, this is." I need to connect with Mia Deneen seriously because I thought I was the only one dealing with this. What are you doing that people can connect with?
Oh, well, I would love to connect. Right now, I am working on some classes where
Okay.
I will be, teaching some classes online.
Yeah.
I have been doing some coaching, but just because of my teaching schedule, because I
Sure.
still teach fifth grade, I have not been doing my coaching like on a regular basis.
Okay.
But I am speaking. I would love to speak at your small group, your conference, and my book called God's Work: How I Overcame Food Addiction Through the Power of God is
Mm.
available on Amazon. I also do lives every week through Instagram, and that is Mia Deneen on Instagram. And I'm also Mia Overton-Smith. Yeah, that's what my handle is on Facebook. So everything that goes to Instagram also goes to Facebook, but on Facebook it's under Mia Overton Smith.
You guys connect with Mia. She's doing an amazing work. And I say that with full confidence because I know that this is something that is needed in the church, but this is also something needed at the leadership level. There are so many women that's listening in right now, and they are leaders in their own right, leaders in their home, leaders in corporate, leaders, in entertainment or what have you. Um, and they too share the same sentiment as you, Mia. They love God. It's not a love issue.
Not a love issue.
You know what I'm saying? But it's something going on in our bodily members that requires deliverance, right?
Absolutely.
And so I encourage every woman to connect with the work that she is doing. She's given all the handles and everything. We're going to share it down in the description of the video as well. So when this goes live, you guys will see her information in the description as well so that you can stay connected with her. Get the book. I have not read it yet, but I already know that this testimony, she hasn't had an opportunity to go even closest deep of what this testimony is. And I know that she shares a lot more in this book that is really going to be revolutionary to you. So you need to get the book so that you can be able to get over into your nook, your secret place, read it, just you and Mia and God
Yes.
walking through this journey as you read through those pages. Mia, thank you. Thank you for your confidence and um, your ability to move beyond just your struggle and your overcoming and being willing to share your testimony to liberate those at a level, a psychological, spiritual, solical level that I think is necessary in this day. We don't talk about it much in the church, but it's necessary.
And praise God. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been my pleasure to be here.
Yes, yes. Guys, we do this every week. Her show is going to be premiering on our platform over there on YouTube. If you have not subscribed, you need to do so. We're having conversations like this that is really transforming and revolutionizing your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, helping you to become the best leader that God has called you to be in this time, in this day, and in the earth. So make sure you subscribe over there at the Global Leaders Roundtable platform. It is TGLR Network on YouTube. We're also going to be airing this on Spotify over at the Global Leaders Roundtable podcast on Spotify. So make sure you follow us everywhere that you get your podcast, everywhere that you get your content. We're uploading these type of conversations. I trust that today this conversation has broken open a well and a spring of healing where God will not only just transform you inside of your body, that he would transform your heart, your mind, and your soul and your spirit as a result of this conversation that I've had with Mia Deneen. I'm Kenyon R. Dudley. I'll see you soon. This has been the Global Leaders Roundtable Fireside Chat edition.